Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I've changed it a bit since we were last here. I've put in about 100,000 more stars and a couple of trees. So it's similar, it doesn't look a lot different, but I think I'm getting a scale organized with this. And I'm going to fill this in a bit. The trees at the moment are on the skyline, but they will come into the foreground when I've worked on that a bit more. So I need to work on the foreground much more so the trees can go on top of it instead of me working around them. They're too finicky to work around. And it is the basic classical way, you know, you start with the background, then the middle ground, then the foreground. Aha.
I'm going to give you some more space now.
Great, I'm just going to grab some water.
Have you ever taken a gulp from the wrong cup, Roger, and drunk something rather horrid?
The answer to that is complicated.
I think that's a yes.
It's what?
Is that a yes?
It's not a yes to do with painting because, I usually when I'm painting either have a cup of tea, so it's something with a handle, or if I'm drinking a cold drink, I drink directly from the bottle. So there's not really much chance of making that mistake. But when I was doing, I don't know if I'd said this last week actually, but when I was designing the interior of Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club, we were in a hell of a rush to get that finished. It was designed and built and opened in about 2.5 weeks. So it was a real rush. And we were cutting up gigantic amounts of foam. And all the tools get covered in rubber cement and are a mess. So they're all cleaned with acetone. And when we were doing that job, it was in Soho in London, and we'd nip out to the local newsagent for sandwiches and drinks. And I bought a disgusting drink called Tizer, which is kind of electric orangeade. And I do remember that people were starting to stop work and sit down, and I grabbed this bottle of Tizer and I took a couple of glugs of it and thought, my God, this is impossibly psychedelically sweet. And it turned out that whereas I had bought this revolting stuff, the bottle I picked up was the bottle that the team from Dunlop, which was helping with the project, was using to decant acetone, which is what you wash the brushes with. So I then had a great adventure trying to talk to Guy's Hospital's poison department. And that was bizarre because at some point there was a program about them on the radio, and for reasons that make no sense to me really, I'd memorized the number. And when I rang them up to say, what do? I've drunk, a few mouthfuls of acetone. The only thing they would say to me is, how did you get this number? How did you get this number? And I was saying, just tell me what to do. What difference does it make where I got the number? And they said, well, this number's not open to the public. Well, I said, it must have been, otherwise I wouldn't have it.
You should have said, I'm not the public. I'm Roger Dean.
Well, that was worse than the public then. It was, as I say, a bizarre conversation. But in the end, their advice was, well, how do you feel? I said, fine. They said, well, drink a glass of milk. And I said, ugh.
No.
I prefer the acetone. Anyway, yeah, it was very nonchalant of them.
That doesn't sound really like an appropriate hospital number at all. They gave you no medical advice initially and then just went, oh, have a glass of milk, you'll be fine.
That's true, that's right. I was not in the least reassured by them.
How's the house project coming along, Roger?
The house project is looking like it'll be the end of the first stage within a week, maybe a week and a half. By the first stage, I mean the interior pretty much finished, apart from another bit of carpet to be laid and a new front door built. But the exterior, that's going to be in 2 stages, and the first stage will be just doing a gel coat all over and sealing it. Again, it's already sealed, it's already got more than one layer of fiberglass. And then we'll be looking at doing spires and some decorative features on the outside. But that's the second stage. So the first stage is pretty close to being done.
So for people just joining in a little bit late, what work have you done on it this week, Roger, and what was your technique for all of those 10 million stars?
Well, I did all the major stars by hand, but then where there is a glow, that was done by an airbrush. But even so, I was thinking there are nowhere near enough stars showing, and they're all too even in size. So I practiced with a nail brush and a knife, putting making a flat cup of paint, putting the nail brush in it and scraping the knife over it. And I did that on a piece of black card to see if it would work, and it worked okay. I got a couple of splodges, but as it was very wet, I could wipe them off, so they're gone. So 3 different techniques: tip of the paintbrush, nail brush, and airbrush. But all the colours were just done with a thick paintbrush. Only the stars were done in this other way. I'm not sure somebody didn't suggest splattering the painting with paint, and I was a bit wary of doing it, so I had to do a few practice runs. But yeah, in the end it worked. Okay, so between now and finishing it, I'm going to make the foreground 3-dimensional, finish here, more trees, and then trees in the foreground, and then the bonfire and the fireflies and sparks joining the stars. So that's my plan.
Jerry Peterson asks, where can I buy windows like those?
Well, they are actually very like the windows on the prototype. So when we post pictures of the prototype, you'll recognize the windows.
Would you like to live in a village of houses like the one you've designed?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess my my hope and plan is that we will build such a place at some early point.
Can I come a tiny bit nearer to see the detail?
Yeah.
Try not to put you off.
This is just underpainting. There's not really any detail there. I'm just giving it form. The detail will come a bit later, but yeah.
How do you know where the light's coming from when you've got 10 million light sources in the sky?
Because they are, by and large, too far away to create shadows too evenly spread across the sky. So I'm imagining a more powerful light source, as you can see from where the shadow is and where the light is, off to the left of the picture, probably the moon or something. So yeah, it's not how do I work out where the light's coming from, but how do I decide where the light's coming from, really? It could have come from anywhere.
How do you make that decision? Do you just sort of choose a direction?
By and large, I think a painting dictates. It gives strong hints about where the light should come from and where it would look right. Very often, though, I work it out in advance. So, yeah, it's not just one way of doing it. What you get very little of with a light source at night time is reflection. So the shadow side is completely without light. Whereas in daylight there would be a lot of light bouncing all around and illuminating the shadow side. And the old rule about shadows is if you have a warm light source like sunlight, you have a cool bluish shadow. And vice versa, if the light is bluish, you have warm shadows. So why are we hearing that?
Giving us an echo. Do you dabble in bonsai trees?
The horrible trick about those is to keep them alive. And I did have a couple, and I couldn't bear the idea of trimming them, so I let them grow to their natural size.
What is their natural size? Do they get big?
Yes, I mean the first bonsais were mountain birch, silver birch, that grew in the mountains in Japan, and they grew very tiny. You might get a 50 or 60-year-old silver birch that was only 3 or 4 feet tall. So it inspired the idea of miniature trees, and they developed a lot of techniques for keeping them miniature, and that's what I didn't really pick up on. I let them grow.
Seems a bit unfair to stunt them.
Sorry?
Seems a bit unfair to stunt their growth.
They look very beautiful. I've been to lots of exhibitions of them, and they are amazing. Very beautiful. You get them in Britain too, north of Scotland. there's a place called Loch Inver, and around there some mountains. What are they called now? Sylvan and I can't remember. But around those mountains is a whole area of thousands of tiny, tiny lakes, ponds really. And around those there's a sort of woodland. And that woodland is miniature silver birch growing in tiny clumps. So it's quite interesting. I'm going to redo that. Didn't work out, but I won't do it now.
Have you ever thought of designing a pinball machine or a car?
Well, I've never thought of designing a pinball machine, but when we first got into computer games, that was my brother and I when we had a company called Magnetic Storm, we did actually design some arcade machines for Taito Electronics, and that was an interesting experience. We just thought the machines they had looked boring, so we designed and made some prototypes, and yeah, it was an interesting process. So that's more of a not quite rather than a no or a yes. If anyone has the book Magnetic Storm, you know, you can see them in the book. And I've got some of the heads of these machines hanging around the studio somewhere. I should look them out.
Now, how's Martin doing, Roger?
Well, we work together occasionally still. Last time we worked together was a few weeks ago, and I saw him a couple of weeks. But we haven't done any big projects together for quite a long time. Be good fun to do it again. So maybe.
What was your favourite project that you worked on with Martin?
Well, that has to go way back to the stages we did. The first one we did was for Tales from Topographic Oceans, and I designed it, Martin built it, but then we did a couple more. Martin designed and built the Relaya stage. The only thing I did for that was to work on the backdrop. But that was the one, yeah, those were the projects that were the most fun. We worked together, of course, in the publishing, and we have worked together on a number of projects, but the stages were the best. Yeah, well, I definitely like to do that again, I guess. The stages were great. The reason I didn't put the publishing as one of my favourites was because I think we worked too hard on that. We did about 100 books in the end, and it was pretty intense. We were doing 12 or so a year, and that was too many. I guess we should have either had more help or done less books. And incidentally had a different partner.
How's it going at training boundaries within the exhibition?
Well, interesting question, because Michael is about to relaunch the exhibition, which we first launched some time ago under the name of the Owl Pass, and it's going to be relaunched as same name but the Owl Pass, and then a subtitle of The Path Goes On, and that, I don't know the date, but the date is going to be defined by getting the new art in and by Michael getting the place fully open, the restaurant and everything fully open. He does weekend concerts, but it's not open every day yet. But I think it will be imminently. And we'll put that up on the website too.
The tower has a similar feel to those on the cover of Yes, the Ladder. Is that intentional?
Give me the question again. Or was it a question at all?
So yes, I'm not sure. So Peter Knight observed that the tower has a similar feel to those on the cover of Yes, the Ladder.
Oh, yes, yes. Was it intentional? To a degree, yeah. Yeah. But the painting doesn't. The painting looks very different. So I'm happy about that.
Have you ever done a painting, Roger, and then realised you've accidentally recreated something almost exactly that you already painted?
I don't think you could do that accidentally. I have revisited themes, yeah, that's for sure. But no, I've never accidentally done it. Yeah, the ladder was meant to look like a city, not just an isolated couple of buildings. So there was much about it that was different. But yeah, I guess the shape of the spires was similar, very similar.
Has Gaudi been influential to you?
Who?
Gaudi. G-A-U-D-I.
I love his work. So let's start with that. I love his work. I love the colourfulness of the tiles. I love his ceramics. And I love the shape of his buildings. And the Church of the Sacred Family in Barcelona is just spectacularly beautiful. So I love his work. And I think mine is different in many ways. It was designed from the inside out, so I was very concerned about the psychology of the internal space. That was literally where I started. The shape of the buildings I enjoy too, because it was the second most important thing after the I suppose the main theme when I was doing my research was to create defendable spaces. But then buildings had to be inspiring, they had to be uplifting, all those things. And if they weren't, they shouldn't be built, really. Buildings should give you a sense of awe and wonder. So you can understand from me saying that I'm not particularly thrilled with modern architecture, which tends to be huge but not beautiful.
Apparently it's hard to hear my questions, so I will enunciate my words more and also move the microphone closer to my mouth. And to answer that question as well, today it's Christabel, not Freya. Always delighted to be mistaken for Freya, that's a huge compliment. But I'm afraid it's just bog standard Christabel.
Yes, I'm not going to comment on the way you described yourself. I will tell you off afterwards.
Roger, could you talk a bit about how your use of light has changed or progressed over time?
Yes, if you like. Paintings like Relayer didn't really have a dominant light source. They had a slight bias, and that was it. And naturally so, because it was a cloudy day. It's overcast. But I didn't really start using bright light sources until the beginning of the 80s. So early pictures, I was much more interested in the subject and how best to look at it rather than how best to illuminate it. That came later. And discovering how powerful light can be was a wonderful experience. I'm not sure, I won't readdress this because I think the light falling on the rocks should be a little more, it should be bluer, more like moonlight. But for now, it's a good base. It's a good underpaint. And I could make it bluer with a very thin, transparent wash.
Going back to the house and its curved walls, how would you display artwork on the inside?
Well, a painting like this, which is square, would be a problem. But, there's all kinds of art, sculpture and other stuff that would fit comfortably in the alcoves. But because we've got mirrors, the paintings would fit, and they would fit into the alcove shapes. But they need to be curved paintings, but they can be flat. Doors, windows, mirrors are all flat. So making flat spaces work in that architecture is relatively easy. Making square spaces, no, not so easy.
No squares here.
Yeah, there you go.
Are you planning to leave the stars shining through the rocks the way they are?
I might. Maybe less than they are now, but yeah, I might. I quite like that. It was not planned, although it was in the sketch, and I left it in the painting. And I might just leave it like that, yeah. I'm sitting here wondering and worrying because this spire is pretty vertical, but this one is a bit of a wobble in it, so I might just paint it out and start again, but I won't do that now. So I'm imagining this will probably be the cover of the album, and this will drift into the back.
Is that a decision that you make, or the band, or collaboration?
No, I see my role when I'm doing this as painting and designing. So the design is an integral part of it. When I look at other artists' work, I can love the craftsmanship of a painting, but it's far more likely to appeal to me if it has a really inspired design to the painting, and even better if it's genuinely creative as well. So the three elements I look at when I'm looking at other people's work: craftsmanship, that's big deal, but design. A lot of paintings you can admire the craftsmanship but rather regret the lack of inspired design. And then if you get those two right, the third thing is to have a really original idea. So that's what I like to look for in a painting. But when I'm doing something like an album cover, yeah, the design is part of the job. The painting is part of the job. You know, the graphics and the logo are part of the job. All these things come together.
And is that kind of your take on it? Are there some artists who would just sort of provide a painting and then somebody else does the graphics, somebody else does the...
Yes, indeed, yes, yes. When we were publishing books, some artists wanted to lay out the books, lay out the cover, do the lettering, everything, in fact. Patrick Woodruff, he wrote the books, he did the typesetting, he did everything. And he was pretty good at everything too, so it was really good. And others, Chris Achilleos, who sadly died a couple of months ago, he did very good lettering too, so he had a good sense of design. Sid Mead kind of let us get on with it, and then he decided on the reprint he could do better, and he certainly made it much more his own when he redesigned it. But that was not all. Some artists were very happy to leave it to us and then tell us off for not getting it right.
The best way.
The best way, yeah. Good plan.
Can you remind us what the painting is for, which album and band?
This is for the Downs Braid Association, and it's called Celestial Hymns. I don't know when it's due out. But I guess by this time next week it should be finished, so that's where I'm thinking we're at.
How many iterations of the Virgin logo were there before Richard Branson gave his approval?
Well, that in itself was an incredible mess. When I met Richard, he was only aged 20 when we met, and he told me he was going to start a record company, and I thought, oh yeah, that sounds fun. I remember going to a party at the Manor House, and he said to me afterwards, what do you think? And I thought, it's amazing. He said, yeah, I'm thinking of buying it. So everything was a little bit informal, I should say. But when he said he was doing a record cover, not a record company, and he asked me for a label, I did 4 or 5 before he finally we're going to release Tubular Bells, and I did the final design, I went in with what I thought might be the final design, and everybody seemed to like it, so I went home and did the finished drawing, and then discovered that they'd released the albums with basically the design mock-up. And I kind of left it there for years until I was looking for, I did the drawings on CS10 board, which is a beautiful heavy board, and it's got a surface paper which is full of kaolin, which makes a very crisp line when you're drawing in ink on it. And it also allows you to make corrections by using it like scraper board. So it was a beautiful board to draw on, and they stopped making it donkeys years ago. And I had a load of it, and I was looking for something. It was all old and battered, and you know, it's 20, 30 years old, 40 years old. And I was searching around in the storeroom in my studio for a piece of CS10 board that didn't have too much muck on it, too much marks over the years, too much drawing. And I found the finished drawing I did for the Virgin logo. And I finished it off and made a print of it, which we gave a print to Richard. So we did that as a limited edition, but it was never used. The finished art for the Virgin logo was never used back in the day. They used a kind of mock-up, which was a mixture of photos and lettering, which the hand-drawn lettering, photography, but the finished thing was entirely a drawing. And I think I numbered it the 6th version of the cover. There were a couple of others that got used and misused in a similar way. So there were a couple, 2 or 3 finished drawings that never saw the light of day.
Where do they go? What happens to those?
I made a print of one, which is available on the website. We haven't done a colour version yet, but we are going to. And I'm thinking of doing a black and white silkscreen of one of the other designs. So, yeah. But the original artwork for both will probably be at Michael's. So, at Trading Boundaries. Are you getting all the questions?
Yeah, just to let you know, lovely viewers, if you have a question, do pop it in the comments. I will, if you make sure it has a question mark at the end, I will do my best to find it as the comments appear thick and fast. But huge apologies if I miss your question, just pop it in again and it will get answered, hopefully. The largest canvas you've ever done?
I've done 2 at 6 foot by 9 foot, and they were both done for the Addison Bruford Wakeman Howe album. The album itself didn't have a title, and I called the paintings respectively Blue Desert and Red Desert. And the Blue Desert was exhibited recently in, I forget the name of the gallery, near Ventura in California. And I understand now it's going to be exhibited for a while at the Lutheran University in the Arts Building.
And what happened to the Floating Islands movie you made?
The Floating Island?
It was the little animation, wasn't it? Let me find that question again.
We were going to make we were trying to raise money to build to make a full-length movie which had the working title of Floating Island.
Yes, I think that's what the question refers to.
It's not been abandoned, but it has definitely not being pushed forward anymore at the moment, because we basically spent every penny we could on the project, getting several scripts done and things, but then we just simply ran out of resources. So pro tem, it's on hold.
What sort of a movie was it? Did it have like human characters, or?
Yeah, it was meant to be. Well, I was working with some people who thought it would be better as animation, but my own view of it was that it should be a live action film with actors.
Mm. Are you still interested in calligraphy, such
Yeah.
as you used to do on your 70s album covers?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, often now I've designed enough of a font to use a font a lot, but I just did a cover for Ann Wilson's new album, which is to be called Fierce Bliss, and all of that was newly drawn. Or did they mean calligraphy in the sense that I wrote out all the lyrics and things, like I did to Close to the Edge?
Maybe.
I always loved calligraphy. The BBC replayed a documentary they did called The Hidden or The Secret History of Writing, which was, I saw some of it last night. It was very interesting. Interesting program. Interesting subject.
Is the Yellow City structure on the Yes box set meant to be reminiscent of the city on the Going for the One cover?
No, good God, no. The cover of the Going for One cover was actually photographed in Los Angeles. Century City, I think it was called. Briefly, I had lawyers based in one of those buildings. No, good God, no. Heaven forbid.
In some of the earlier live sessions a while back, you were painting waterfalls. Were those published?
Oh, not yet. No, but they will be. I remember that. But the painting that's being referred to is actually at the exhibition at Trading Boundaries. So you can see it if you're in the vicinity at any point.
Head on over. Are there images of the canvases on your website?
No. We could probably do that. Could probably put them up. Not a bad idea. I don't think we've had them properly photographed, so I get my work photographed with a company in New Haven called Howard King, and they take super high resolution. You can't really call it photographing because it's no photographic process involved, although it looks like a camera. It's basically a scan taken from a distance of about, 5 meters or something like that. But we get a scan that can be anything up to 800 megabytes, or even a terabyte. No, not is it not a terabyte after megabyte? Whatever comes next.
The next one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Big.
Big, big. Clunky to handle on my computer. But it's good for archival purposes. It's great to have that density of information of a picture, because you can go right into some little teeny area and it remain crisp, and it's just great. I love those very big scans.
When are you coming to San Francisco?
It's not fixed, but it looks like it will be in summer. We're hoping to do this exhibition to run from August to October in San Francisco, Freya and I, and we'll probably be out there before then, getting ready for it, so probably late July or July, August. Yeah, and possibly, it's not fixed, but it has been discussed, the possibility of going to San Francisco again in April, May time. So, yeah, could be. I love San Francisco, so I'm glad that we can now travel again, and I say that, touch wood. I think we are at the point where I'm going to say good night to everybody and thank you so much for coming. This should be, I should prepare this a little bit more in the gap between now and next week, so that we can essentially finish it next week. Maybe then do something else. So thank you very much. I hope to see you again next week, and good night.
Good night. I'll finish on the painting.